Hello, welcome to today's webinar where we look at how L&D teams should approach the shift to digital. My name is Bogdan Tiganov. I'm the Head of Content Community at Cypher. Joining me today are Fiona McBride, Learning Consultant, and Toby Gilchrist, Head of Implementation Services, LMS at Digits. Welcome, guys.
Hello.
Good morning, everyone.
And first up, Toby, just to say a few words about Digits, please.
So good morning, everyone. Toby Gilchrist, Head of Implementation Services at Digits. And at Digits, we have our learning platform, GoLearn LMS, which is an enterprise-based platform. So it means we can customize, configure to really reflect on our clients' learning requirements. And we've also been creating content for a number of years now. So 27 years experience in the digital learning world, building e-learning, digital websites, etc. So between content and platform, we can produce some pretty cool things to reflect learning requirements.
Cool, thanks, Toby. And Fiona?
Hiya, thanks for having me here. My name's Fiona McBride. I'm a learning consultant and facilitator. I've been freelancing now for, 9 years, I think. Nearly 9 years. Been working in L&D for a lot longer, so we're not going to talk anymore about years on that. I'm really passionate about good L&D, and I absolutely love kind of helping people learn. Like, that's my thing. I'm also a yoga teacher, so make sure you're kind of stretching and sitting up straight in your chairs. Get away from the desk, stand up and listen to our webinar, maybe, if you want. Move the body a bit. I have a variety of clients that I work with across all different types of industry, doing all different kinds of things. And one thing I really love is supporting L&D teams to evaluate their offer, to think about how they are offering, supporting, curating good learning, and just helping people to have really good learning experience. So thank you very much for having me today.
And just to go over the agenda today quickly. So we're going to start off with looking at learning from the pandemic and sharing stories. Next, we're going to look at what research tells us about what works, harnessing the advantages of digital learning, engaging people through digital learning. Then we're going to investigate some practical tips for effective learning online, and finishing off with culture and environment and how you can prepare for digital. And just to let you know, this webinar is being recorded, and the recording will be emailed to you tomorrow. That's the 20th of October. And just to start off with a question from Fiona.
Great, thank you so much. So yeah, I wanted to hear from you all, and I was intrigued to think, I wonder, when you first saw the term shift digital in the event description, what came to mind for you? So if you were up for finding the chat box, hopefully it's there, typing your message in and sharing a couple of quick thoughts with me around what you first kind of thought about when you hear that term shift to digital. Kind of what does it bring up for you? So we'll just have like a few seconds that you gather your thoughts and yeah, find out where you're coming from with it. And this is always where I think we should have some kind of like lift music or hold music. Bogdan, it's like should be kind of like background music. Like
I don't know if it's available on this version of the platform, but it's one I can suggest.
And it's really interesting because I think this shift to digital has been really different for lots of people, which is why I like to ask the question and kind of to hear people's experiences. We've not had much in the chat, so I'll tell you what, let's move on to the poll.
Fiona, actually, interestingly, all is come up in the questions panel. So if you go to the questions panel, they've all come up. Yeah, so there's lots in there.
Not in the chat. Oh, brilliant.
Not in
Can
the
you
chat,
share a couple of things with me just while I get that up?
So if you open up that panel.
Yeah. Oh, amazing. I do apologise.
There
I
you
was
go.
box there ready. I'd written hi in there and everything. Oh, excellent. Okay, yeah, learning online. Mary, I really hear that. Kind of, it can be quite lonely. Yeah, absolutely. Online, giving staff the opportunity to learn at their own pace. Holly, I absolutely love that. Self-managed learning. Holly, I could talk to you about that all day. That could maybe be another session we do. I'm really passionate about that too. And then Helen, yes, of course, that moving training into a virtual setting and then moving what was face-to-face to to online one. Angela, thank you. Excellent, thank you very much. And Holly, your point there saying it's 2021, why haven't we shifted yet? Oh my gosh, I feel like we're going to get on so well today. I'm kind of there with you with that thought. Thank you so much for the comments. I'll keep my eye on that box now instead of the chat box. Bogdan, let's run the poll then.
Let's run the poll. Yeah.
Question here again, just to kind of get your thinking and hear from you a little bit. What technology do you use to support learning in your organisation? So we have a number of suggested options here. We have learning management system, we have virtual classroom, we have content libraries, video podcasts, and then there might be something else. So you can only choose one in the poll. So just choose your top choice. What do you use the most at the moment? And if your top choice isn't on that list, then use other and then share in the chat or in the question box what it is you are using technology-wise to support learning in your organisation. So we've got two contenders coming in quite loudly at the top. I can see that there at the side. Okay. Another couple of seconds and then we'll close the poll down. Yeah, so quite clearly straight away we've had virtual classrooms coming out as the top, so things like Zoom, MS Teams, etc. And then LMS coming in quite quickly after. And then interestingly, I've just noticed in the chat we've got a couple of comments from people. I love Angela saying a full learning ecosystem, all of the above. I can't just choose one. Do not apologise, Angela. That is like gold star material right there. And it's absolutely right, isn't it? If we can use more than one thing, then that can be really helpful. And we're doing kind of the best that we can for the people that we're supporting to learn. So I think, so thank you first of all for engaging with us on that and sharing your thoughts and using the poll. I suppose it's important to be really clear at the start here about what this session is here to do and what it isn't. And Bogdan's already kind of clarified with you the points we're covering. But I suppose it's important to share that, yeah, I'm not here to kind of tell you about taking your face-to-face content and putting it straight online and then calling it digital learning. And I think from the comments we've had so far that I'm in good company, and that's probably not where you're at. Because this is about how you navigate from one space to the other. And for some of us, that's been quite easy. And for others, it's been quite tricky and maybe still is. Because we all know, right, that, well, we should know, good L&D professionals, that you can't take face-to-face content and just put it online. So you can't take that 5-day manager development program and replicate it in the same way online. It just won't work. And it'd be quite unfair to the people that you're kind of supporting to develop. That digital, you know, I think is important to remember. It's a method, isn't it? It's a way of doing something. So it's not a state of being or a magic tool. So it does need a little bit of effort and design around it, design thinking around it, just like it would be if we're in face-to-face. So I think it's important that we take a step back or maybe slow the pace a little bit and think about how can digital be great for you, or how digital can be great for me in my organisation. How can I use it as a really effective tool, as a method to helping people learn, right? And that's kind of a key point, I think, that I'll come back to later on as well, that I think is really important. That digital is a great enabler for learning, but just making learning digital won't necessarily help you to support business performance any more effectively. So I'm hoping that that's resonating with some of you. And again, by all means, use the chat or the question box to kind of share any reflections as you're hearing from me here. And I think another really important point about L&D is that we've got to remember that we don't control learning. L&D, the L&D team, the L&D person in an organisation doesn't control the learning. And I think sometimes we kind of forget that, and only from a place of wanting to help people and wanting to do good work, because learning is everywhere. I was reminded by that. I saw that on a tweet from Ed Monk he said learning is everywhere, and it's true, and it's kind of everywhere whether we like it or not. It's always happening. And I don't know if you know this statistic, but it is estimated that over 70% of learning happens outside of formal learning. And I think that's really important thing to remember, because, you know, I think that part of this is the challenge for kind of the modern L&D person, is to kind of, you know, how to let go, how to stand aside and enable others to learn rather than kind of control others' learning, and becoming someone who gives support and provides a space for learning and curates and signposts, etc., to help other people do really well in their L&D and in their kind of professional development, in that learning journey, which I know sounds super cheesy, but I do kind of believe it. I just realised this is being recorded, isn't it? So that's out there now forever, the learning journey. So anyway, yes, utilising digital within learning is a brilliant way to help ensure people kind of have that really good learning journey. And when we look at the CIPD, so the Chartered Institute of Personnel Development, who I work with a lot, who I've volunteered for in the past, they do really great research and surveys, and they have provided clarity around digital in L&D, and I thought it would be useful to maybe show that to you, like share that with you rather. So we've got these three broad overlapping categories that they say kind of digital learning covers. One is formal digital learning, okay? Then the other is informal, and then the other is blended supported learning. And I find these three categories to be like a really useful reminder that it's good to have a balance, and it's really good to consider maybe all those spaces when you think about digital. And actually, from some of your responses already to the poll and to your comments into the question boxes there, you've already started to touch on some of those things. So blended supported learning, you know, self-managed learning, learning on informal digital learning, that kind of thing where we might not need a facilitator or an L&D person, that it actually is knowledge sharing and happens by chance. And then that formal digital learning, you know, the virtual classroom space or the traditional e-learning, yeah? So we're seeing that the, oh, Helen, don't worry, I'm just about to move on the slide, do not worry. I'm about to come to the next slide, not to worry, you're exactly where you need to be. So already it's really nice to hear from you all that you're thinking about digital in these different ways. So we're not just thinking about e-learning, we're not just thinking about LMS, we're thinking that bit wider. So if I start to think about learning from the pandemic, and there's a really nice quote on the next slide, which you'll see shortly. If I start to think about that, it's really impactful when you look at some more of the research that's been happening. Fosway Group are amazing, they do really insightful research. And this stat I just had to share, you know, 94% of L&D professionals report to having changed their L&D strategy in response to the pandemic. You know, that's massive, that's huge. And I'd really recommend looking at their infographic, it's super interesting. And they survey a really wide variety of people. And I think, like many organisations, a number of my clients found themselves in new territory after March 2020. And I'm not sure about yourselves, and please feel free to share in the chat, in the question box, because, you know, it was inevitable that we would need to utilise tech to a greater extent to stay connected, because so many of us were working from home, not going into the office. And so to stay connected, to keep working and learning, when so many of us were kind of forced out of the office, you know, we needed technology to do that. And there were L&D professionals and organisations who embraced this shift, 100% embraced it. And some I spoke to were almost rejoicing, because they were saying, finally, I've been talking about this for years. So I'd love to hear from you, if you are happy to make a couple of comments, you know, like where were you? So use the chat or the question space to to share with me? Were you like really ready? Were you like, finally we can use technology in our learning design and in our learning delivery? Or were your organisation quite there? Maybe your organisation was there already actually, or was your organisation kind of still kind of waiting, still not sure about the kind of digital learning space? Because I've really heard extremes of both. And I know in some organisations there's been this pushback against the use of tech in learning for quite a while. And so for colleagues and clients and connections of mine who know how useful and enabling and innovative it can be, well, they were really ready for that shift, you know. But I appreciate, for many reasons, some organisations weren't quite ready and maybe still aren't, and it's been really tough, and I really get that. So I'm not sitting here thinking, you know, it's super easy, like we all can just, you know, click of the fingers and we can switch. I do appreciate there's a lot to consider. But I have been talking about utilising tech in learning for a while, and it's been part of my work with my clients, not solely tech, but that blended approach to tech. And I think it can add, I see it adds real value, and for, you know, for a number of reasons. But again, the research since March really does highlight that that shift has been a really positive one and moved a lot of people on, maybe moved them forward like 2-3 years, you know, in their planning, because of they've had to kind of get that strategy shifted and realize that actually we need to get there sooner and utilize tech quicker. There was some more interesting research again from Fosway, who were sharing that 71% have experienced an increased demand for digital learning from the end user. So 71% of organizations have been saying, you know, people within organizations have been saying, we need this. We can't wait for the next face-to-face classroom course, session, workshop, whatever it is. We need this sooner. So we need now to have this. And again, digital can look and sound like many different things, and we'll come on to some of those shortly, some examples. I found it quite interesting as well that when you look at the research, that video, curated resources, mobile learning and micro learning is kind of the highest rated stuff. And that's again something I've been talking about for quite a while, because it's easy, it's quick, it's bite-sized, it's things that you can kind of pick up and add in quite simply, right? So it's quite nice to see that that's still useful for people, and it's definitely something I suggest to my clients that they focus on, is not trying to overhaul everything, not trying to reinvent the wheel, but try small little things that you can start to build up and add value by using. I think as well, what I saw with my clients is that they were quite smart with their existing use of existing technology, and many of you might have done this too. So reusing intranet pages, Yammer, Slack channels, making great use of Zoom functionality, things like breakouts and recording sessions and resharing them, using whiteboards, that kind of thing. And I think it's quite nice as well that, again, with technology, there's a lot of stuff out there that's really simple. So I was working with a couple of my clients who were running regular workshops, and we ran them through Zoom, but we also were running in the background a Jamboard, a Google Jamboard. Other online whiteboard spaces are available, obviously, but we used Jamboards, and they were a really brilliant way to effectively, it's basically like having a flip chart paper and post-it notes, right? And it's free. So we were able to use like really good video conferencing, like meeting tech through Zoom, and then we use Jamboards to do group activities and tasks and gather information and ideas. So it's simple kind of things like that that were already available, that didn't need like lots of learning about, that we kind of utilised. And other things like MS Teams, of course, and whiteboards within Teams and Zoom are available, but other external ones like Miro can be amazing. You can have a really smart, interesting space where you can curate and gather resources where people can engage with each other and contribute. And then at the same time, you're online with each other and having dialogue. It's really, really smart tech out there that you can use quite simply. I've noticed as well from this time since March around the role of L&D. I found it quite interesting, and there's a number of different reports out there, and we can share some of these reports, links to reports with you after if you're interested. But I think the role of the L&D professional anyway has changed in the last few years, and that's something that's been talked about widely. But I think with regards to what's happened in the last year and a half, I think the role has really shifted, and again, I'm really keen to hear different perspectives. So if that kind of resonates with you and you feel similarly that maybe the role of the L&D professional has kind of shifted, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the chat or in the questions box. I think we have to do a bit more listening. I think there's a bit more in our work where we can listen a little bit more to then help support. And like I said, we're not the ones to be in control of the learning. We need to actually kind of support and curate and almost become, there's a term that's been used in my networks in the last year or two, performance consultant. So engaging and kind of consulting with people who need to learn to help them find a solution, to kind of work with them alongside them. And I think that kind of came out a little bit in the last few months, definitely what I saw in working with my clients and kind of supporting the organisation, listening, slowing down and paying attention and finding out what was a priority, what was important, and how we could help and work alongside somebody rather than kind of running off and doing a bunch of stuff, designing a bunch of training that maybe actually wouldn't be exactly what was needed. I also did a piece of work with a large public sector body towards the end of last year and into the beginning of this year, and it was a big research piece looking at how they had shifted from face-to-face to online. It was really interesting, and it was a large public sector organisation. I can't mention exactly who they are, confidentiality, but I'm allowed to kind of share the themes, and the theme was the same one that I've been talking about already, that it's a real kind of two ends of the spectrum piece, isn't it? About people were ready to go and were already doing digital or were wanting to do it but had some barriers, and then people who aren't quite there yet and they're thinking, and that kind of was mirrored in this piece of research that I supported. And there was a lovely couple of quotes from people that I interviewed and spoke with, and I was going to share. One's on the slide, but I'll read it out again just in case it's not as clear for everybody. But they said, if anything good had to come out of COVID, I suppose because we've been forced down a different avenue with regards to digital learning, there's power to our elbow to say, look, we can't deliver that way anymore. So we can't deliver in that, get everyone in a classroom, 25 people in a classroom once a month, and then have to do that session again and again and again because there's like 300 people you need to support, And they said, it really helped make people sit up and take notice. And a lot of people started thinking, wow, why have we been traveling all the hours we've been traveling? Why have we been paying for hotel rooms and refreshments and all the crazy things? Getting people away from their jobs, doing long journeys to come to a head office and sit in a classroom where you can only fit 20 people and then have to run that same session again and again and again. But when you're online, you can run it with 300 people and still have an interactive, interesting and engaging session. And it is doable if it's done well, if it's digital learning done well. And I think that's the key thing, which goes back to my point about how we can't just take content and put it online and then call it digital. There's a bit of work to be done. There was a really lovely point as well from a really high proportion of people that I spoke to that talked about how it's better for their students that have things like childcare, maybe have a disability, maybe they have a caring role, caring responsibilities, that the learning being online, being digital, is so much more inclusive. And I don't know if any of you have found that. And again, I'd love to hear any comments that you have that you want to share. But and they said that is just awesome. And that came out really highly. People really recognized that taking the learning and putting it into the digital, into the online space, had some really significant advantages. So I think that it's clear that digital is here to stay. I'll happily be challenged otherwise. But I do think it's sometimes difficult to convince those we need to of the benefit. I hope that the pandemic has kind of helped with that. Again, it's not good. The pandemic is not a good thing. But if anything good was to come out with regards to organisations and staff and the work-life balance, well-being, etc., and then having this different access to learning, because it is sometimes really difficult to convince people of advantages. But there's a number of things here I just wanted to highlight, and I've kind of started to touch on a couple of them already. Because many people, learners and stakeholders in our organisations, still think that face-to-face is best and that shouldn't change. And I wonder if that's because that feels familiar. I wonder if that's because we have a lack of familiarity with the digital space. We use it for lots of other things, but we don't kind of think about digital being a space for learning. And I think that can be shifted if we do digital well. So some of the key advantages of digital then, a couple that I've mentioned already about inclusivity. So it's inclusive, the access is potentially just tons better. It also means that it's more just in time with the learning. You know, that's self-directed. Who's mentioned that before? Holly said, you know, it is self-directed. So then it becomes about learning when it's needed for that person in their role, so in their context. So I'm very much a L&D person who believes that to be very important, that people should be able to come to the learning when they need it, you know. Easier access to learning comes into that. So similarly with that kind of 24/7, if it is online, if you have recordings, if you have curated resources, if you have libraries, if you have a lovely LMS that's easy to dip in and out of, then that easier to access becomes great. And when something is easy, when something isn't complicated and it's easy, then people will come back. They will come back to that. There's a lot of savings that we've noticed and that have been reported upon with regards to travel time. I mentioned that before from one of the bits of research that I did. The time of traveling, the traveling itself is very tiring, and for some people it's not very easy. So well-being wise, health wise, a big shift in that regard. And then cost. I mean, I don't need to tell all of you, I'm sure, the cost of sending somebody onto a course sometimes is totally valid. Don't get me wrong, I'm not saying face-to-face is over. I still very much believe in it. But again, it's that actually, if we can do this well online, why don't we try that? Because we can save, make these savings in this space. And then interestingly, really good for the environment. I'm sure you all were aware of there were many news reports around kind of the environment and less travel, less cars on the road, less planes in the sky, etc. So there's actually another thing around, corporate social responsibility with regards to the environment, the well-being of staff, communities, etc. So they're just, a small number of, and there are many others, kind of advantages to moving to digital. But one thing I found really interesting, and it's a quote I've got for you, which is actually on the next slide, and it's this, and I found this super interesting. I just want to give you, I'll read it just if you don't want to read the screen, but good quality digital learning can be just as effective as traditional in-person classroom learning, with the majority of studies finding little or no significant difference in the learning outcomes achieved. I don't know about anyone else. I feel like we've missed an opportunity to do a poll here, Bogdan, actually, because I remember the first time I read that, I was like, wow, like that's massive, right? Because I don't think many stakeholders, if you have a stakeholder who's not quite convinced about digital learning just yet, I wonder if sharing this with them might help their understanding. I would highly recommend looking at this report. It's the CIP Digital Learning in a Post-COVID-19 Economy. It's really interesting. And you know, we know that informal learning works. We know that spaced learning is important. So all those things kind of happen outside of classroom learning anyway. So I wonder if we just need to shout about it a little bit more. You know, I wonder if we need to be a bit more firmer in knowing that, you know, there's research, there are studies that say that actually utilizing digital and giving people space and time to come to their learning when they need it is a very positive thing and helps them in their roles and ultimately helps the business perform well. So yeah, basically, if done right, I think digital has other advantages. There's so many that I could talk about, depending on different types of course. But we talked about accessibility, but convenience as well. You know, it's convenient to fit it into someone's day. It also increases the ability to deliver across like multi-site. So another big thing was about how people found over the last kind of year and a half plus this connection and this learning alongside colleagues that they may never have met before. So global organizations were able to start connecting people in a really different way. And again, if you found that, I'd be really keen to hear your thoughts. People learning at their own pace, a self-directed learning piece is really key. And there was some interesting research by, well, according to Forbes, by the Research Institute of America, retention of learning appears to be improved when delivered digitally. So that was a really interesting kind of piece around the Research Institute of America concluded that digital learning boosts retention rates by between 25 to 60% compared to retention rates of 8 to 10% with traditional training. It's massive. Again, it's huge. So there's so much data out there that shows us that digital learning can work really well. And yes, we might have been forced into this shift to digital in the last kind of year and a half, but actually, you know, maybe that can be something that we can see as a positive and that we can continue working well with and getting right. So on the next slide, I have another quote. I'm a bit of a fan of quotes at the moment. I'm seeing there's so much interesting research out there. This is what I talk about a lot. When I go into work with my clients, I talk about kind of the learning environment and the learning culture. And I feel quite strongly about this because actually, ultimately, at the end of the day, whether we're learning in a classroom, in a workshop space, face-to-face, or we're digitally enabled, we need a good learning environment. So I do believe that preparing for digital learning has a lot of the same foundations as preparing for any learning at all. And Bogdan and Toby and I were having a conversation about this topic as part of our prep for today. And I think Toby said it. He said, you know, around this, you know, shift to digital, we've maybe a good way to think about it is evolution, not revolution. Yeah, we don't have to have a huge digital transformation piece here. it's really important that we remember learning is happening all the time. And we maybe need to take a bit of a step back and take that more holistic view. And I have a couple of questions for you to reflect on, and these can be to take away, but we put them up on the slide just to share them with you, because I think it's important to stop and think before we make massive changes. So I really like these questions and often use these questions when I'm chatting with my clients, when I'm going in and trying to find out what the culture of learning is about, what the environment for learning is like. And these can tell you quite a lot about what's currently going on to then help you start to think about your next steps. So what is the attitude like towards learning currently in general? How do we talk about it? Is learning a good thing? Is it seen as a positive thing? And are people given time and space for learning? And then do we trust people to develop and problem solve for themselves? And then that last point about what role do we take? So that's the L&D person or team. What role do we take to help support people to learn? So there are some questions I'd really suggest taking away and thinking about and reflecting on. And then I wanted to share with you, before we come to hear from Toby with some specific examples from his work, I wanted to share with you kind of some things about, what does work, what I've seen work really well. So having asked those questions, what then I've started to explore with my clients. And there's a number of things here. And there's one thing about keeping it social. The other thing is about making it real and practical. And then about having a spaced learning approach, especially being digital. This works for face-to-face too, to be honest, but also for being online, bite-sized, spaced out learning opportunities. Making sure it's accessible, of course, having things with subtitles, having different ways to access the content and the messages, and then also having the support by senior leadership. And using these things to help to make your digital learning as effective as it can be. So we want people to learn together when they can. That we know that really helps people to learn, and supporting someone else to learn helps you to learn. That helps with retention. So we know all that stuff is important. So how can you make sure there are still these social spaces where people can connect with each other? And then also making sure that it's super practical and real, so people are actually able to take something away from it and action it really soon. Or within the context of the learning, you're offering these points of reflection to help people to make sense of the content in their own context. So these things are really important and are points that I talk about with my clients a lot, and I work with them a lot on. And I have a quote from Jane Hart, who talks really nicely about this and makes a really good point about it in relation to the pandemic itself. And she says flexible and responsive options need to be considered, and when it comes to learning, obviously, particularly as autonomy has been a key feature of working from home. And I just love that, because I thought I've been talking about self-directed learning for years as well, and that's still not quite been kind of picked up on. We talk about it a lot in our industry, but yet where's the trust in learning? And that again could be a whole other webinar conversation. So maybe now is that time to think about this, to start to move your strategy towards that self-directed, spaced learning, supportive, bite-sized, social space, to help people have the best learning experience that they can have, and the best learning experience that they need. So I'm going to pause there. I'm going to hand over to Toby, because I know he's going to share some really nice examples of this shift to digital with you from his work. Thank you.
Thanks, Fiona. So yeah, I just wanted to flag a couple of examples here, like Fiona mentioned, where I think these are just fantastic examples of bringing all this stuff to life. And the two very different approaches from two of the clients that I work with. So within my role, I get that luxury to kind of see what they're working on, obviously sounding out ideas with myself, and at Digits we actually support in bringing these things to life and actually working with our clients to configure, customize, develop, build content. But this first example was actually built fully in-house by our client Jardine Motors Group. So the actual learning requirement was essentially IT skills, buying into Microsoft Office 365. There was a need to learn Word, Teams, Excel, the whole Office suite. And they actually had some resources provided by Microsoft they could have essentially just linked off to. So little quick videos, how to operate teams, how to build groups and teams. But they didn't take that approach. They thought long and hard about it. What's our strategy here? How are we going to sort of educate the entire workforce on the Office suite? And the approach they took was to identify 70 individuals in the organisation that had engaged with the platform, completed a number of activities in their platform that they host with us, and they identified these 70 champions as their IT skills champions. But again, they want to educate these guys to obviously use them as champions in the organisation to upskill the entire workforce. But again, instead of just sending links off to these videos to these 70 champions, they came up with this idea called digital ninjas. So the idea is that these 70 guys were becoming digital ninjas in the workforce, and again, instead of just going through a realm of links, it was put a bit of thought behind it, used some internal resource where they have that luxury of having a design team in-house, and put these beautiful images together that kind of represent that 16-bit retro game idea, where tapping into the gamified features of the platform, tapping into this idea that it was a game, you got these really nice sort of interactive maps, these interactive journeys that you're working through, and you're kind of ticking these boxes, digesting these videos through Teams, Office, Word, Excel. So yeah, just a much more engaging, gamified, but just that idea of putting almost like a marketing strategy behind it, really, and putting a bit of thought and engagement of these 70 champions. But what I really like about this example, it was obviously utilising the platform, but utilising resource in-house. There was no sort of need to come to Digits and for us to provide it to them. Where flicking on to the next slide, very similar approach, is in really thinking about what's the requirement, what we're trying to achieve, but working with closely with our client Kia. We kind of went for that premium luxury experience where, working with them very closely, we pretty much developed, designed all the elements of the Kia Power Program. So the idea is that it was this idea of you don't just learn what you need to learn. There's that continued learning. So the idea is that you'd have to earn 200 points in your first year of working at Kia, specific learning for your role. But the idea is that then, after you've earned your 200 points, you can continue your learning, go and discover things in the learning library, go and access digital content. What's really important with both of these examples, it wasn't 100% digital. Primarily, they were both very face-to-face focused before leveraging the platforms, but there is a real true blend where there's still what we call one-to-one activities, where you can track real-world conversations in real life, manually mark statuses, attend virtual classrooms, attend face-to-face classroom events. But they're that typical phrase we always tap into, the true blended learning. The platform allows that blend to take place. So we designed custom visual learning journey images, badge designs. We even developed with our development team custom widgets where it presents your points and how many points you need, when you need those points by, dashboards. So that every element of the platform, I think we touched on for this Kia Power Program. But I think these are great examples of that contrast of utilizing what resource you have and what tools you have, and then sort of tapping into that full premium experience, leveraging our specialist skills at Digits. But I think you can kind of see from these two flavors of screenshots, they both are kind of achieving a similar thing. But yeah, I just really want to share those both with you, and to kind of read more on these, if you go onto the Digits website, there's a couple of case studies where you can read in a bit more detail about what Kia and Jardine and our other clients have achieved. I'll pass back over now to Fiona.
Thank you. Thanks so much. It's really nice to have those like specific LMS examples as well. I appreciate it. I've been talking quite widely, haven't I, from that kind of L&D approach. So to have that specific example is really nice. I think what I wanted to kind of finish on, and then we will have some time for questions if there are any. I can see some, I've just been catching up with the comments in the question box as well. So thank you for your comments. I've just caught up with all those now. I appreciate it. Was this kind of point around what do learning professionals need to do? And I have already spoken and said a number of things, but just to maybe recap on 4 things that I feel are really important with this and that have worked from when I've been doing my own work in-house. So before I was freelance, I was in-house, and then with my clients since being freelance. And I think it sounds really simple and we say it a lot, but really take that time to understand what your people need. And there was a really nice kind of reflection in the question box there from Helen, who said that she works in a hospice setting and it kind of prevented them reaching their non-digital staff and volunteers. So of course, whilst I'm here going, digital's great, of course there'll be times when it won't always work, or it won't work, you know, 100%, and it's making that decision, isn't it? So it's knowing your audience, knowing the people who are there that you're looking to support, and working out then what is it they need and asking them. Again, I do feel like, and I think we do this for good reasons, I think we often work away sometimes from the business a little, and because we want to create something really great and do a really good job, and then sometimes we kind of lose that connection with the business. And I'm not, honestly, I'm not saying that's a critique. I've done it myself. I've been asked to, you know, develop something. I've gone all kind of guns blazing, like really excited and really geeky about it, and then kind of had to remind myself to like reconnect back in with the business, with the team, or the area of the business that I was supporting. I think that's quite common. So remembering to keep checking in, but also remembering that we don't have to have all the answers, because the business are the ones that need to learn, and they're the people that can tell us what they need a lot of the time. So understanding what your people need is like my key kind of piece of advice. My next thing is about taking your time, and I said this early on and kind of partway through. It's that take an opportunity to slow down, take an opportunity to stop and kind of regroup, gather, and don't rush into it, and don't feel like we have to do everything digitally at once. I'm a big believer in kind of this approach of like hybrid learning, and doing little small things well, and then kind of building, you know, making it sustainable, building it up, etc. And I think that really applies here with digital. It's like try a few little things, you know, add on a couple of digital elements to an existing program you're running, use a Jamboard in a Zoom session and see how it lands with the group, you know. So try little things and take your time and test the water a little bit. And then also, I always say this to all of my clients, and I say, what about you? So where are you at with this? Where are you? How comfortable are you with this topic? You know, you've come to listen to this session for maybe a variety of different reasons, but is this because you're starting to think about this more? Is it because you're needing to develop for yourself? Or maybe you're thinking, actually, I want to gather as much data and information as I can before going back into the business and sharing with my stakeholders around what I think the best, you know, digital learning strategy is. You know, the best approach to my learning strategy is, digital or otherwise, for my organization. So give yourself, like, allow yourself that time to understand and to get clear in your own head too, and do the learning and the fact finding for yourself. And then don't reinvent the wheel, you know. Just everyone's been doing this, people have been doing this for years, some have been doing it for months, some have been doing it, you know, everything in between. So go out and connect with your peers, connect with your network, and find out what other people are doing. People talk about this stuff online a lot. There's I don't know how many of you are on Twitter. I'm on Twitter and LinkedIn, and there's chats on Twitter, there's discussion boards on LinkedIn where people are talking about this all the time. So go out there and hear what other people are doing. And also people are really generous and they're really good at sharing where things haven't gone so well as much as where it has. So kind of that learning from just testing stuff out and seeing how it's landed and if it's good or if it's not good and everything in between. So don't feel like it's all on you to kind of create this from scratch, from new for yourself. To kind of be kind. Maybe I should add a fifth point here. So kind of be kind to yourself in amongst all of this. And I have this this photo which I was allowed to keep on my slides because I love a photo. I also love stationery, so if you knew me you'd know I love stationery, and this was in a notebook I bought, and I just it's been open on my desk for a while, and I've used this a few times on presentations now, and I love it. It says start where you are, use what you have, and do what you can. And I think that's huge for me. I think it's a really nice thing to try and remember, because you're all trying to do good work. You're all trying to support your businesses, your organizations, your colleagues. So, also kind of give yourself some credit and give yourself like that recognition that you're doing good stuff already. You can only keep moving forward, right? And keep doing new things, new better things. So I've given a number of slides with lots of different questions on, I appreciate, and I know that we can make sure you get the presentation. We'll work that out, we'll get it to you. My final slide before I go back to Bogdan and hand back to him are just a couple of other questions, again, that I just often find useful to use in any learning context, which is that piece about slowing down and checking in. What are you doing already? Is it working? If it's not working, why isn't it working? And what else could you be doing? And I quite like those questions. And those questions sometimes are excellent to actually ask the people that you're supporting to learn. It kind of engages them in the conversation around their learning, their development, their needs. So I just wanted to kind of pop those onto a slide as well. And John, I can see your comment there. I can see you're doing a career development guidance course, so you could definitely, use some of the quotes. I've given the sources to all the quotes, and we can give you links if you need them too. So I'm going to say thank you so much for being here. I'm going to hand back over to Bogdan. I know we're really keen to hear what has this got you thinking about. So using the chat box or the question box, whilst I hand back to Bogdan, it'd be great if you're happy to share any thinking that you have had in this last kind of hour or so. Thank you very much.
That's brilliant. Thank you, Fiona. Thank you, Fiona and Toby, for the excellent presentation there. Yes, so this is an opportunity to ask questions, and if you haven't already done so, you can do so in the questions panel. Was there anything in particular that you wanted to answer from the questions raised so far, Fiona, during the presentation?
Yeah, so I was just having a look through. We could sit and get on our soapbox. I think I mentioned this before with Holly, where she said it's 2021, why haven't we shifted yet? We could all get a cuppa, couldn't we, and stay for another hour or three and talk about that. I was just looking through. I think what I wanted to draw maybe attention to, if I can, just quickly, is about Helen's point, and I very lightly touched on it just because of time before around being inclusive, but it's really important. And so Helen said, in their hospice setting, it has prevented them reaching out using digital, because some of their staff and volunteers don't have access to digital. And I used to work for the Royal National Institute for Blind People, and I completely get that. So even when we were doing sessions around utilising HR systems, years ago, it was really tough because not all the volunteers and not all the staff could easily sit at a desk for an hour and catch up on their admin, because they were out there supporting, service users, etc., and customers. So I really hear that. And so again, I think I might have touched on this before, but it's that thing of, okay, so just acknowledging that, recognizing that, and going, okay, that's that situation. So what else can we do? Which is why I love thinking about digital learning as part of a wider learning strategy when we think about all the different types of learning. And that's why I like that term hybrid learning, where digital just forms one part of many other options, which I think is really, really important. Helen's also shared and said, really reflective, thank you. We are embarking on some digital support lunch and learn sessions, which we feel are what some people need right now. Absolutely. And there's some really amazing topics that you can like really kind of touch on in like a 45-minute hour session quite neatly, that just gets people learning and gets people thinking differently and accessing different topic areas. I've been supporting clients with well-being focused sessions around like nutrition, and we did a cooking demo, and having different sessions like yoga at the desk and breath awareness, and opportunities for people to slow down and switch off. So I think there's lots of lovely shorter bite-sized space learning things we can build into our offering for sure. And then Holly said that she's thinking about her own development around digital learning and devising a plan around promoting virtual classrooms. Yeah, that's really nice, again, about just slowing down and taking that opportunity to reflect. And I don't know if you're on Twitter, Holly, but there's loads of people talking about what they're doing, and they're doing it really well. So that's something maybe you might want to touch on. Like maybe go and kind of seek out people online and ask them how they're doing it and what they're doing about it. Because everyone's at different stages in all this, aren't they? They really are.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, and thank you for all the comments and questions that have come in. I think that's all we've got time for today. So thanks once again to Fiona and Toby for the excellent presentation. If you'd like to find out more about Digits and Digits Learning Solutions, do email us via getintouch@digits.co.uk, or you can opt in to find out more information via the exit survey. There'll also be a question there asking us what we could do, any feedback for future webinars, which would be highly appreciated. But in the meantime, we look forward to seeing you at a future Digits webinar. Thanks again.